they've retired the young faces that reflect the next generation of leadership and the diversity and complexity of our society. You're seeing in the transformation of this government and of our party, quite frankly, as we're seeing increasing diversity and a greater level of comfort in politics. And I think that's very important. One of the things that you'll notice about the new members of the Ontario legislature is most of them are very highly educated. And a lot of, I think, their confidence in leadership roles that they've been developed and the health of our democracy and our literacy has been the fact that our universities and our colleges are some of the best in the world, and they're the most, as our society is, some of the most complex and multicultural places in the world. We cannot maintain our civility, our democracy, if we cannot maintain social mobility. And the announcement today isn't just about money for students and help for families. It is about ensuring that every political office, every role and leader in business, in culture, in labor, in academia is open to each and every Ontarian. And that cannot just simply be rhetoric. You literally have to put your money where your mouth is. We all know when we go back to that important moments in our history as Canadians and as Ontarians that there were points of departure and forks in the road that determined our well-being. For me, it was my 18-year-old grandmother who came to Canada as a young girl, not speaking English or French, arrived almost 100 years ago at what we now call the Una Station in Hamilton, walked in there, and I just imagined her at the dawn of the industrial age, coming from a small village in Ukraine, walking into the wonders, the pollution, the energy, the fear, the cold weather. Her elder in her village said to her, "Maria, don't go to Canada. It's too frozen there. You can never grow anything. You're going to starve to death. It's an iceberg." And you can imagine there was no cell phones or radio for her in her community. She went blindly halfway around the world. What incredible courage. And I think for her and so for many of us who look and inspire members of our family or extended family who did that, we take that moment almost breathlessly and realize that had it not been for the courage of that young woman, I would not be here today. And I can't imagine when she entered to the bustle of Hamilton that she'd imagined that her grandson would be standing as a member of cabinet in a legislature in this country in just 2 generations. And I remember the other important moment in my life, when my whole family gathered around because I got my first acceptance to university. And for the very first time in my life, and I often said, more than the citizenship papers that my grandmother got, the real pass to being Canadian was the moment I got accepted to university, because that meant that trajectory was going to be different for me than it had been for my mother or my father or my grandparents. That I was now no longer an ethnicized, hyphenated Canadian, nor was my sister, nor were my very diverse family. We were now in the milieu of success and of acceptance, and we were becoming nation builders that we had so desperately wanted to be as a family to build this country. And the first thing we did as a government was to add 200,000 places, and we're about to add another 60,000. So I just want to talk about that for a second. That's accessibility. So what does that mean? That means something very powerful, extraordinarily powerful. What's happening is, right now, more than in 2003, 260,000 more qualified young Ontarians and their moms and their dads and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles are going to that mailbox and they're getting a yes, not a no, because we've created 260,000 places. So we've been dealing with the accessibility issue. The quality issue, we put $6.2 billion more into colleges and universities than were there when we were elected in 2003. So when 250,000 more students, of which there are now almost 1 million, over 900,000 students in our post-secondary system are getting yeses, they're getting yeses to a much better invested in government. A government that isn't taking $500 million out, as previous government did, but putting $6.2 billion in. But then we stopped after the last election, because we're not giving up, and said, okay, what do we have to do next? And Premier McGuinty and the team said, now we've got to remove barriers. So not only are people they're about to get a new letter in the mail. Sometimes for many of them, a new email, because we're in this very sophisticated world. And that email for 310,000 students, 475,000 families that will get some form of student aid, they're going to get a check that says it's $1,600 if you go to university, $800 right away in January. It's $735 if you're going to college. Now let's just talk about that. I was out in Brampton Just think about how expensive universities and colleges can be for a family. I met a young Muslim fellow, family was from Pakistan, had been in Canada. He was first born in his family. He had 4 older siblings. He said, "Minister, can you imagine what it's like? All my sisters and brothers are in engineering and chemistry and medicine and sociology. I have to go to school. Can you imagine for my parents right now, already supporting 4 kids in tuition, and I've got 2 siblings behind me?" So you think about that. For each of those students, that's $6,400 over 4 years. Multiply that by 4 or 5 kids, and you're well over $20,000 in savings. You can imagine how different that is for the very real demographic in our society of increasing numbers of families that are coming here with 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, many of them going to school. We are talking about $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 over the next 4 years, which is the difference whether 2 or 3 people in that family get to go to school, or whether it's only 1. And we would never want to ever have a student who is denied that their access to education, not because they can't learn or they're going to qualify, but because they can't afford it. And on top of the second career program, tripling post-secondary education grants and tuition since we've been in government, this is the biggest step forward, the largest investment in post-secondary education in most of our lifetimes. It's almost $500 million. It's $310,000, and it builds on programs for older workers, the 50,000 students in second career. And it's going to help all kinds of families because it is that second ticket. It is that second ticket to mobility and success. So I want to thank you very much for coming out today. I want to thank you for working so hard to make this, and I'm hoping that you'll be out celebrating with champagne a lot more graduations in your own family in the coming months. God bless, and thanks very much.